what role did religion play in the conquest of Africa?
Well, it played a key role because it came in with brotherhood. And the African believed in brotherhood. It came in one world idea, one great brotherhood. And of course, although there were some states that resisted this, saw through it for a long time. And for example, remember the eternal Martha. You never forget them. Because when you can't generalize for the continent, you see, because we're not talking about one nation, we're talking about a continent of people, you see. Have to keep that in mind every minute when you're talking about Africa, that you're talking about a continent. And we generally talk as though we're talking about one nation. We're talking about a continent made up of many nations. Okay. There were those who saw through the trick of religion as it was presented by both Islam and Christianity and resisted both. The Martha state was a great example of this. And there were others who resisted for a while but eventually gave in because trade was a great attraction. Say, okay, you want to let us in? Well, can you let us trade around your borders here? And they established trading posts all around your borders, and gradually, you got in. But surely you let the Christians come in with they just want to preach to you about the same God that you believe in. Just want to show you there's one God over all.
But it was all trickery.
Found this one.
But it was all trickery.
Yes, it turned out to be nothing but trickery. Now, I would not say that this was a grand design of trickery. They just saw there was the traders were shrewd enough to see. The explorers, the conquerors, were shrewd enough to see that if they carried the missionaries in, they wouldn't have to go in fighting. Missionaries in trade as the first bait would make their pathway easier. I would call it, and have called it, the blacks' naivety, the blacks' gullibility, the blacks' over quest for brotherhood. For as I pointed out in a number of places, we were always the brotherhood seekers. We were always the brotherhood seekers. And this has been our main downfall. It's never the reverse. The whites only sought brotherhood or pretended brotherhood, or the Asians only pretended brotherhood. And when they saw an advantage of economic and political rule as an ultimate outcome.
Why is it that you always hear about European invasion of Africa, but very little about the Asian and the other groups that you mentioned?
Because the Europeans were the last. Colonialism is uppermost in our mind. Colonialism has just been, that is, political colonialism, I put it that way, has just been destroyed. Economic colonialism still persists in Africa. So the European hold on Africa was politically broken when they began to become free and set up their own government. However, as I also point out in my writing, that Africa is only half free, and I would hardly call it half free, when it's only politically free. It will not be free until it's economically free. So long as the economy is still under the control of foreigners, then its government is under the control of foreigners. It was unfortunate that blacks in the United States are still, like their African brothers, absorbed with the idea that politics is their salvation. Politics is not the salvation of the blacks. Politics is only one aspect. Without the other, you're nothing, and that is economic power. Economic power controls the politician. The politician acts and is controlled by the economic power of this nation. of any nation. That's where the power lies.
How did slavery come to be restricted to blacks?
Well, this is called a sort of lengthy explanation, but as brief as I can put it. The system was, for example, let's take the first widespread enslavers, the Arabs. They had a patrilineal system. Their offspring by black women belonged to the father. They were generally freed. Now, this is a very important point because it became a universal pattern. The freeing of the offspring of non-Africans by African women, whether they were Asian or European white, they were generally freed or given a highly preferential status in jobs, in education, and so forth and so forth. And slavery, after the great white slave rebellion, became, as is generally known, there was a time when everybody was enslaved. Slavery meant no more than political prisoners. I think that's generally known. To be a slave in the ancient world had no racial connotation at all, no racial significance at all. It just meant that whoever was victorious or had slaves, this was a pattern. And they knew very well that they were enslaving scholars and scientists and what have you. They knew that fact as they saw it out. The scholars and the scientists took care that they were not killed or hurt, because they wanted to use them in the home country. Okay, so slavery didn't carry any taint other than that would be carried by our present day POW, prisoners of war. That's all it was. But now a change took place after the white slave revolt. After the white slave revolt that murdered so many of the slave masters. Then slavery was discontinued among whites and concentrated upon the blacks. Thereafter, no white slavery among these other people died out. Now, since they were not enslaving those people who were of lighter hue by reason of their either Asian or Caucasian blood. They were concentrating on those with blacker skin. Therefore, not only was slavery limited to the blacks as a race, but it was limited to the blackest of the blacks, which is the reason why the word black itself became a symbol of bad luck, because they weren't going to bother you. If you were light, you took a better chance of being free, had a better chance of being free than if you were black. If you were black, you were subject to be seized. Therefore, it was bad luck to be black, and this is one of the reasons for that. So, in addition to the facts mentioned with respect to the enslavement of the blacks along color lines, I think it should be pointed out that the circumstances of conquest of the continent in which the invaders had the opportunity to make millions and millions of dollars in the slave trade, together with the exploitation of the mineral wealth of the continent, also together with the divisionism they were able to perpetuate among the blacks in creating strife among the various language groups. All of this made the blacks easy prey to conquest. Finally, in addition to the other facts mentioned in connection with the previous discussion, our willingness to drive for brotherhood and our easy acceptance of the foreigner's hand and his expression of goodwill. So we became the victim of our own gullibility in a very, very real sense.
Specifically, how did Europeans and other groups go about wiping out the contributions of blacks? 2 or 3 things that you could mention.
Well, we've already mentioned the system of how this is done. They simply would take the achievements of the blacks and claim it as their own, all without mentioning the source of their new ideas or their what they call new, in quote, discovery or invention, things which they had removed. They simply would present it as their own creation.
In your book, you talked about how I think the Europeans, if I'm correct, would knock off the nose, the African features of statues. What about this whole thing?
Well, of course, there had been a system, a classical, what they call the classical style, over several thousand years of painting, where it was not regarded as proper to either carve, paint, or draw an individual as he really was. You used a form that you regarded as idealistic, a representation of him, which was not supposed to be the true representation. The true representation was always regarded as vulgar. And this was a practice, by the way, in Europe also for a long time, where in any number of cases where they called that which was common, like the common language of a people, was regarded as vulgar. So you have to use something classical, like Latin, to be respectable. So it was in the drawing and such like things in Africa. Therefore, when Khufu had his picture, his actual statue in the Sphinx, carved in his true likeness, his true African likeness, broad nose, lips, and all. This was revolutionary because this wasn't done. He was supposed to, according to the classical tradition, he was supposed to have sharp nose, not a flat nose.
Once again, who's this?
Khufu. He was supposed to have a brownish type of skin and so forth and so on, features, or whatever was the classical style for the period, and not the natural. Now, this shouldn't be shocking if you know the history of Europe or the history of other countries, what was classical and what was regarded as vulgar. But now we look at pictures of the Egyptian pictures now, or pictures of early Africans even. And they don't look like the actual Africans in many cases, except when they want to present them as slaves or something of that kind.
Okay. As you look at African history, do you see any parallels between that history and the condition of blacks in the United States? Do you see any parallels between the history, the African history, and the condition of blacks in the United States?
Well, it's the same thing. As a sort of amendment to the question of slavery. why the whole continent was overrun, and where the whites, relative to a handful by comparison to the total population, could capture and control so many millions of blacks. It is due to disunity. It is due to fragmentation. It is due to the fact that they each wanted his own little kingdom, his own little chiefdom, his own little state, and would not cooperate, would not unite for defense voluntarily, even in the face of danger among themselves. So you have the same parallel in the United States. Blacks today are confronted with a real peril. We're in a state of crisis, but don't know it. We are actually in a state of crisis. Our very existence as a people is being threatened on many fronts, and we are dancing along just as though nothing has happened. We refuse to organize. We do not have the will or the intelligence to organize even as we did on the Garvey. Remember the Garvey, a man coming in from another land, you might say.
Marcus Garvey.
Basically, yes. Marcus Garvey organized a half of the race in a few years. Over 6 million blacks in one band in a few years. We haven't done anything near like it since. Now, we're backwards. We're acting backwards. And this is not a good picture. So the same thing then is the same picture as in Africa. Lack of unity. And this is the real answer to the question of why we were successful in slaves. It's the big answer. A lack of unity. A lack of brotherhood among ourselves. Ready for brotherhood with all other people, just as in this country we are ready for integration with the whites or anybody else, third world or anybody else, but we're not ready for integration with ourselves, which is the first step for progress. We've got to integrate among ourselves first before we can be prepared to stand as men and women and deal with the rest of the world as equals. But we don't seem to be willing to do that. And this, the parallel in Africa and in the United States and in the islands, wherever blacks are found, you find the same situation which led to our ultimate destruction and our ultimate enslavement. A refusal to unite among ourselves, but a drive to unite with other people who would welcome our unification so that they could use us to further their own ends, which would mean ultimate conquest, ultimate superiority, ultimate world domination.
Why do you think many blacks are less inclined to unite than whites are?
Well, they are less inclined to unite, I believe, for the same reason that we've been discussing previously. That is to say, we are trained to think against ourselves. We are anti-us. We do not have the same respect for, by and large, this is true, for our own people as we do for other people. And you see, you begin by loving yourself, your own race first. You put a high value upon your own. Well, the reason for this is, we've already mentioned, we were cut off from and are still generally absolutely ignorant of our own cultural traditions, of the great men and women of our own bloodline who have made contributions to the history of mankind and to the creation and advance of civilization unexcelled by any other people. But do we know them? No, we don't know them. Hence, we imitate and try to unite with the people about whose achievements we know. about the great women of the white world, for example. We know about Catherine the Great of Russia. We know about Elizabeth I of England. We know about Queen Victoria, even named the biggest inland water in Africa after her, Lake Victoria. We know about them. But ask any black child, or any black teacher for that matter, what do they know about Queen Candace? Do they know anything about Anne Nzinga? And so on down the line. And about the great men and women of our race as a whole. This is the crux of the matter. So that not having this cultural background, which is you are devoted with pride to your own race, because you, like all other people, can trace your bloodline not through their cultural tradition, not through their Napoleon Washingtons and so forth, but through your own race. And this is why knowing about the history of your race is different from any other subject matter, you see. This is why the whites put so much emphasis on history. It's not history per se. It's keeping in touch with and making sure that their children and their children's children know what their heritage is, which is another way of saying what their birthright is. What is their claim to civilization? What is their claim to equality among mankind? This is their charter. The charter is a knowledge of your own cultural tradition. And we don't have this. And this explains all of our peculiar behavior, our anti-us, our failures to unite. This is why you'll hear some of our most eminent so-called leaders say that no matter if you have a school in an all-black community with all the modern facilities, no matter if all the teachers are drawn from the greatest universities on earth, if they're all black, no good. It must be integrated. You must have busing to get them somewhere to mix them in with white. You have to have a balanced situation. What caused this sort of idiocy? But a lack of faith in your own. And feeling this way, in all totally black situations, the idea is an expectation that your standards must go down. Don't talk about high standards of efficiency and that sort of stuff. No, you're supposed to bring it down because we're not supposed to be 100% efficient and so forth, like other people, unless we are among or integrated with them. This is the answer.
In the chapter, The Black World at the Crossroads, you say the Negro leaders who spearhead and carry on the campaigns for integration not only do not know the great heritage of the blacks, they do not want to know it.
Yes, the reason is quite clear from what I've just said. They don't want to know it because they feel comfortable with their own training. They've been trained. You see, this didn't happen overnight. This started in the primary grades. When you open your little primer, all you saw was beautiful little white children with rosy cheeks and blonde hair and so forth, rolling hooks and so forth, and right on up. You didn't see anything that reflected you. So right on up, out, right on through college, through graduate school, through medical school, you didn't come in contact unless you went to some extra effort outside of the school curriculum.
In
with your own race, and this is the reason. This is the reason.
In the same chapter, you write about capitalistic democracy and communism. You say that communism nor capitalism is the real issue in the Cold War, but that in fact the Cold War is a contest between two of the strongest white powers for world domination. What do you mean here?
Well, I mean just that. And I don't need to elaborate on that. I mean just that. Nothing less, nothing more. It's a struggle of Russia, as it was under the Tsars, for the expansion of the Russian Empire over the world, just as it was under the Tsar. Simply took it up under a different name and a different crusade now. American capitalism, assuming to take the leadership of the so-called free world, is determined to see that its system prevail. And so that it's a matter of who can influence the most people in order to see which of the great powers will either dominate the world or have the greatest share in the power in world domination. This is what it is, and of course, you could write a book breaking it down into detailed analysis, but this is what it is. The United States doesn't care anything about a country being communist. So we pour as many billions of dollars into Yugoslavia and into Romania and Romania and the other countries as we would in any other so-called democratic country. Why? Trying to get them not to be overly devoted to Russia. They don't care anything. The United States don't care anything about these countries being same thing in the case of Poland. American dollars, our dollars, we, the people, because that's what it is. You're talking about American dollars. You're talking about what we taxpayers pay. Going to these various communist countries now, we were really anti-communist. That wouldn't happen. So I don't need to go into any detailed elaboration. What I'm saying is rather obvious if you just think about it a moment.